Glad you're with us again on the Retirement Compass. Brad Johansen, Tim Kulhanek, and Jeremy Gove, Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and you. Thanks for being with us, guys. Nice to be back with you. We're good?
Yeah, great.
We're always good.
Yeah.
We're always good.
And we're trying to take you through the education process to make you only have to retire once. That's the only way you want to do it. But there's a complete plan within this, which is why we're going to try and take you through this. For, I think a lot of you, if I think about estate or legacy planning, that's really the tail that wags the dog. I don't need to think about that until later. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure I need to think about it now, Tim. I want to go into, if we talk about, when you hear the word estate, people go, I don't have an estate.
Yeah.
I got a house, I got a car, I may have some land. The estate thing is for people with mansions and big things. Lead me into this as why this is significant and important for everybody in retirement planning.
Yeah, because if you own stuff, you have an estate. If you own anything.
You got stuff.
You got stuff.
Yeah.
And I know it. I'm looking at you. You got stuff. So here's the thing. Like, everybody has this misconception that if I don't have gazillion dollars, that I don't need an estate plan. It's not about money. It's about control. Simple as that, right? Because let's start with what an estate plan isn't. It isn't a product you purchase. A lot of people think death and taxes. I got to go get a will. I need a trust.
Gotcha.
And have you ever heard of Parkinson's rule? Not the disease, but the rule?
I have not.
Okay. The amount of time allowed for a given task is how the amount of time to complete a task will fill the amount of time that's allowed for its completion, okay? So in other words, if there's no end date on when you have to have it and you don't want to think about it because you got to think about your death and think about your estate plan, you're just never going to do it, which is why there's a sobering statistic I'll just share with you right now. According to Trust and Will, okay, online scrivener service for creating estate documents, 55% of Americans have no estate plan at all. In other words, 55% of Americans are just leaving their wishes and their loved ones completely unprotected.
Kind of huge.
Kind of a big deal.
And you say, well, I don't know whether I have enough stuff to be even worried about that. Walk me through different, look, I need a will, or as you said, I need a trust, or I know who I want this to go to, Jeremy. So why do I need to worry about, walk me through phases of what I should be paying attention to? Because as Tim just said, if I don't have an end goal, and I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do through this, I've got a problem.
Right, exactly. Well, estate planning, kind of to Tim's point, it's not just when you're gone. Estate planning actually has three parts, and we actually have a slide I'd like to pull up that shows the three phases of an estate plan. The first one is we call them the who, and what.
Okay.
And so the who is phase one. Who is in charge while you're living if you can't act? So that's the phase one. Phase two. Well, phase one, it would include your powers of attorney, your HIPAA forms. We call these living documents.
Gotcha.
So those documents are going to be there to give somebody the ability to make decisions on your behalf if you cannot, right? The second one is the phase two is who is in charge when you are deceased. So that would be the executor or a personal representative. Those are end-of-life documents, right? Phase three, this is the what, and this is what does everyone get. That includes your will, your trusts, beneficiary designations, transfer after death documents. The critical part is this is not just your will. It includes other things like your beneficiary designation forms and other documents.
So you're saying a will doesn't cover everything. And I think a lot of people, if you're going to the 55% statistic that don't have something planned, but I think if I get to that point where I'm at the end, I'll write a will and it should cover me. No?
Happens all the time, Brad. And here's the thing, like, I'll just give you a recent example.
Okay.
A couple came in and we were in our conference room, right? With our very nice conference table, courtesy of Rastus Snow out of Litchfield. He doesn't pay me for that, but Rastus does such a fine job.
Yeah, you like the table.
He deserved the
It's an amazing
It's a
table.
beautiful table.
Right? Yeah. I won't tell him that we've got a little ping pong net that we set up in the middle, and my kids and I play that on the weekends.
No, he's not hearing this.
He doesn't.
Everything's good.
They love that. It's a lot of fun. What pepper Pong?
Pepper pong.
Okay.
Yes.
I like it.
So we're sitting at this conference table. We got the estate attorney up on the screen on the TV. He's zooming in because he's not available to be in the office, which is fine. And we get to the point where he says, hey, look, I'm going to coordinate with Tim. And he's explaining like, hey, we work really well together. There's synergies here because I do my thing and I stay in my lane and Tim's able to execute on the retirement and the investment side. And oh, by the way, I'm going to make sure that we coordinate beneficiary designations so that way what needs to go by the will goes through the will and what goes by beneficiary designation goes by beneficiary designation. And they said, well, what do you mean? It's going by the will. That's why we're doing a will. Well, no. Whatever you write on that beneficiary designation form, that's who's getting that money. I don't care what your will says. Your will says it goes to, the Save the Seal Fund or something. Like, it's not going to them. If your beneficiary form says it goes to the Save the Sea Lion Fund, the sea lions are getting it, not the seals, It doesn't matter. Your will does not override your beneficiary designation. So that was a revelation for them. And so if you're hearing this right now and you're thinking like, I didn't know that, call me, right? We need to have a discussion about these things. But another thing we found in that discussion was that what they had, right? They had this really elaborate, complicated trust, and like they had this Venn diagram and all these different spreadsheets that went with it. They had no idea what it said, what it was supposed to say or how to use it. It wasn't funded. It was like a vault without a wallet. You couldn't use it. There was nothing in it. There was no gold and no Scrooge McDuck type of vault opening up. It was just empty. And so we found out that like what they originally had, this is before I involved one of our strategic partners, what they originally had was just complex, and it was something they basically got sold something they didn't want, didn't need, and couldn't use. And so that can happen too. So reviewing your documents on an ongoing basis is critical.
There's a term here that I have on notes. Putting a vulnerable child at risk kind of sounds concerning.
Yeah.
Why do I have that on the notes, and why is this significant?
So it's the same situation, right? And everybody has, let's say it's a Jonathan. Sorry to the Jonathans, I'm not picking on you guys. It's a good name. Let's say Jonathan is just a wayward son, right? He's gone off the beaten path and he's had some trouble and he's been in and out of jail and he's gotten in a way that he shouldn't be.
Struggled
right?
with decision making.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe he needs a little bit of corrections
Okay.
and maybe that's what he's getting. What you don't want, there's something called the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, and first do no harm. There's the same thing. There's a Hippocratic Oath of finance, and that is do no harm. And in estate planning, we know from plenty of years of history and data, there was a book years ago called The Millionaire Next Door, and it talks about how people either become a net contributor, so to speak, or a net taker. And people who get dumped large lump sums in their lap, right, all at once, who have never generated income or resources on their own, become net takers. In other words, they stop producing on their own, and they just start spending what they've been given, and before you know it, the money's gone, right? And they're in a worse shape than they were in the first place. Well, everybody has a Jonathan. Well, everybody knows a Jonathan, right?
Yeah.
Well, this couple, they had a Jonathan. And the way that their current estate plan was established was he just got a third outright. And I asked them, this happened in the meeting. I said, guys, what would happen today if both of you died today? What would happen if he got a third of this estate? This estate was over $2.5 million. What if he got a third of that? What would happen? Without missing a beat, they both said, not looking at one another, they just said this. They said, oh, it'd kill him. It'd kill him. Because you don't want to put a vulnerable person in a worse position they are. So why is estate planning on the retirement compass? Because until your estate is protected, until your family is protected, your estate plan isn't complete. Your financial plan isn't complete.
So it's not the tail that wags the dog. It is what you need to put in place right now. Complementary written financial plan that includes estate planning. Everything that you have. If you've got stuff, you've got an estate. 866-256-7778 puts you in touch with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And maybe this is just a time to say, I thought I had everything in place. Maybe you need a second opinion to make sure that you do, that your compass is online. Let's put together a complimentary written financial plan for you, 866-256-7778. You need to know more. We'll tell you more when we come back.
You know, if you think about the average American consumer, we don't talk about financial topics very often. And so we spend a lot of time at Stonebridge doing educational seminars and different things that are free of charge. If you're not educated in a topic, how do you make educated decisions? When you're working with a client, you're sitting down with them, they're a little stressed out, but after you go through the process and you really take time to educate them on not only what we're doing for them, but why we're doing it, that really gives them peace of mind, and you can see the weight just kind of drops. And when they leave, I hear all the time,
I really should have done this years ago. But sometimes there's a fear that somebody might try to sell us something. If the things that I can provide, if you don't want, don't need, or can't use those, I've got some good news for you. We're not going to sell them to you. We are fulfilling our fiduciary duty of putting their interests ahead of our own.
So glad you're with us. We're talking about legacy planning, estate planning, and that's not for millionaires, that's for everyone. And if you don't know what you have or the questions that you should be asking, these guys have put together something easy for you. It is stonebridgelegacy.net. So you can scan the QR code here. This is, again, very user-friendly. All of this is about education. You either know or you don't know. And for most of us, we don't even know the questions to ask. stonebridgelegacy.net. Scan the QR code while we're talking about this as we move through what you should have as you move into retirement, and make sure that you have things in place. Intestate, succession. Explain that. Both of the terms may not actually. What are you talking about? Fill me in on this, Jeremy.
Yeah, so intestate means you pass without any planning, right? So you don't have a will, you don't have anything like that. So we do have a slide that we can pull up on this. And what happens if you do nothing? In our live workshops that we do on estate planning, we often talk about, or we mention, either you choose or they choose, but either way, you choose, right? So if you choose not to do anything, you're leaving it up to someone that you don't even know, that has no idea what your wishes are, to make those plans for you. And it's going to be designated by the state legislature and the state where you have legal residence. So this slide is kind of a mess, and that's what estate planning is. If you don't have a plan, it becomes a gigantic mess. So if you die without a will and you're married with children, and the first $100,000 goes to your spouse, the remaining is split 50-50 between your spouse and your children. So what happens if you're in a second marriage and your spouse gets $100,000? The remaining is split 50-50 between your kids and your spouse. They may or may not get along. So is your spouse going to have enough money to live if something happens to you? That's a question. If you're married and you don't have children, your entire estate goes to your spouse. That's the easiest, simplest scenario, actually, of all of it. If you're unmarried with children, your entire estate is split equally among your children. If you have no spouse or children, your estate goes to your parents, siblings, or extended family. But who gets nothing? And this is the critical piece. This is what shocks most people. Unmarried partners, stepchildren who have not been adopted, charities, friends, whoever you wanted to leave money to, they're probably not going to get anything if they fall into those categories.
And this can be a very long process for people to go through to.
Yes, absolutely. It's very, extremely slow. It's very public as well. Yeah. Most people, when we work with clients, doctors, nobody really wants anyone else to know what they have.
I
right?
don't want my business out there.
I don't want my business
Privacy.
out there. And what happens when you don't put a will together, or you don't have a plan, it becomes very public and it costs a lot more. And to your point, it's very slow. And the people that you love and need access to your assets may not have access to them until that process is over.
This isn't rare. This happens all the time. Real life example, I know you have one, of people who've come in where this has gone wrong. Give me an idea.
I'll give you a couple. So a quick one, there was a gentleman in the other day, and he was visiting with Zach, one of our staff advisors, and he wasn't married, he'd never been married, he had no children, and he's like, look, I just want everything to go to charity. I don't really care what happens to my stuff. I'm gonna spend whatever I spend, and then I just don't care, I'm not worried about taxes so much because I'm gonna be dead, and so whatever, It's like, okay, so is there anything you don't want to have happen? Because you don't seem to care, but is there like one thing that you'd be like, well, this, and he goes, yeah, I don't want to go into my brother. I can tell you that much, because that guy, he's had everything handed to him, and I don't want a dime going to him. Okay, you could pull that chart back up there for a second if you can, Levi. If you can't, that's okay. So look at the bottom left, no spouse or children.
Okay.
Estate goes to parents, siblings,
Uh-oh.
or extended family. He had no will in place. He was set up to do the exact thing that he said he didn't want to do. And this stuff happens all the time. So he made a choice, whether he knows it or not.
Committed relationships, because I see on the slide, unmarried get nothing. So we have, generations change, right? So we have a lot of partners. This is my partner. You're married. No, we're not married. How long have you been together? We've been together 10 years. Unmarried partners in this situation, nothing?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, actually. And this actually happens more often than you would think. We had a client's brother that died after living with his girlfriend for over 30 years.
30 years?
30 years, not 10, 30. She did not own a home. She didn't own their home. So she was basically evicted. After 3 decades together, she had zero legal rights to anything. And the reason is, the way that the laws are set up is if 20 or 30-year relationships in the eyes of the court look like a stranger.
Yeah.
They don't, that doesn't matter. You didn't make that decision to provide those assets to that person, so they must not have mattered to you.
I like to say that law trumps love, unfortunately.
Okay, you got a one big shocker to take us home on this whole. Look, a bunch of this is, hold it, really? But is there an ultimate shocker? Okay, been together 30. Is there something even in the marriage that causes an issue in the court if this isn't figured out?
There can be a few things that come to mind for me that I think are often overlooked, especially for younger couples. So I met with a couple the other day who, I was going to talk about this on a previous show. They're way ahead of the game for savings. They've got over $400,000 in Roth accounts, and they're in their early 30s.
Oh, fantastic.
And did they inherit it? No. They just got good advice when they were just starting out.
Yeah.
He had a coworker who said, put all of your paycheck, he was like living at home, put your whole paycheck in your 401k and do all Roth. So they're doing a lot of good things, but they have 3 young kids and they have no will. Well, what happens if something happens to both of them? Well, intestate says it goes to the kids. Well, the kids are not 18. They cannot legally own an investment account. So what happens is somebody goes to a court and says, I think I should be the guardian for these children. So there's 2 different things. There's the conservator, the person in charge of the finance, and then there's the legal guardian that's going to take care of the kids. They don't have a will, so they don't get a say. The court is going to decide. That becomes a conservatorship account. Now you got to go before a judge if you want to take money out. It has to be for their benefit. It becomes a mess. I'll do one more. You say, okay, that sounds pretty bad, Tim. They need to do something. But it's not that big. That could be easily fixed. Okay, one more. This is the LaBeouf case. So LaBeouf versus Energy. And essentially what happened here is there was a guy named Alvin, and he worked for 36 years, and he had named his 4 children as beneficiaries of his 401k in the year 2010. You could look this up. But then he remarried in 2014. He never updated his beneficiary form because he wanted it to go to his kids. He had already said that it goes to my kids. Well, here's the thing. A 401k is governed by what law? Anybody know? ERISA. A federal law called the Employee Retirement Income Security Act that works different than IRAs because IRAs are governed by state law. State law would have been fine. He leave it as is. There's no spousal consent required. 401ks are different than IRAs. His statement still said, your kid's your beneficiary. Now, he had been given multiple plan notices saying, hey, if you get remarried, your new spouse has to sign off on this. But he was like, well, my beneficiaries are accurate, so I don't need to worry about it. He died. Who got his $3 million?
His wife.
New wife. And kids got nothing. That's how important this is. So when I say that estate planning matters and that it's not a product you buy, it's a process in which you engage with, this is what I mean.
So if you have not gone to the QR code, you need to do that. But the idea is, and we do this every week for you to say, this is complicated because the rules are out there. And as Tim said, law trumps love. If you don't have an understanding of legally where everything is going, wouldn't you want an expert to help you through this? That's when you want to make the call to 866-256-7778. Let's put together a comprehensive written financial plan that includes your legacy, So you understand where your money is going, and it goes where you want it to go. 866-256-7778. Back after this.
Let me ask you something. If anything happened to you tomorrow, would your family know what to do? Would they know where your documents are, who to call, what your wishes are? I've worked with a lot of families, and I've seen what happens when the clarity that they need is missing. It's not the money that causes pain, it's the guessing. That's why we put something together called the Legacy Quiz. It covers the key areas most families overlook, from wills to powers of attorney to digital accounts and where important documents are actually stored. It's quick, it's free, and surprisingly eye-opening. You can take the quiz now at stonebridgelegacy.net. Now, this is a small step that can help your family avoid some very big problems. If you own an annuity or are thinking about one, you've probably heard a lot of conflicting information. The truth? There are many types of annuities, and each is designed to solve different problems. Some provide guaranteed income, others protect against market losses. But not every annuity is created equal. If you're unsure whether your annuity is doing its job, it may be time for a second opinion. Refinance your annuity today with a complimentary annuity review.
Hey, glad you're with us on the Retirement Compass. Brad Johansen with Tim and Jeremy, Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And we're talking about estate planning. I want to get to as much as we possibly can because we talk about wills. And we mentioned a lot of the numbers. How many of you don't have anything? But if I have a will, is a will enough? We get into the incapacitated part of this. Is a will enough, Jeremy?
When it comes to incapacity, no. The simple answer is no. And this is an example of if I'm incapacitated. Imagine you're a healthy 59-year-old and you have a sudden stroke, right? Who makes those decisions? If all I have is a will, who's going to be able to communicate clearly or manage my finances on behalf of me or my family or my children? Nobody else can do that because they're not going to accept any instructions unless there's a document that says they've been authorized to make those decisions, right? So they have no power of attorney. There's no healthcare directive because they thought estate planning was for the wealthy, or they were going to get to it at some point, right? I know I need to do it. That's on my list. I've got that list in my junk drawer at home. What happens immediately? So no one can access bank accounts. No one has clear authority to make medical decisions. Bills go unpaid. Accounts begin to freeze. To help, the family must go to a court to ask a judge to appoint someone, and that's not always quick. Right?
Never quick.
And it's definitely not cheap to have that done, right? So it takes time, it costs money, and it puts a court in charge of making those decisions for you.
Okay, I'm not worried about it. My spouse can take care of that, Tim. She knows what's going on. My spouse can take care of it.
Yeah, I'm married.
I'm married.
We're good.
We're good.
It's what a lot of people think, but unfortunately, it's not that automatic, okay? So a question I always ask my clients I work with, I said, okay, let's imagine you couldn't get out of bed tomorrow. Not that you don't wake up, okay? That's a different story. We talked about that already. You just can't get out of bed.
Okay.
Who do you want making those decisions for you? And do you want them to have to go before a judge in order to make them? Or are you like, if I need help, do I want help now? Because this all, like you guys said, it takes time.
Court. If you say court, forget it. It's not quick.
I had a situation recently where, this is a tragic situation. I'll tell this quick. Some clients of mine, their son had passed away. Young guy in his 40s passes away, leaves his 401k to his 3 children, and they're minors. Well, he left it to them. They can't, like I said earlier, they can't manage money.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not 18. So the court had to appoint a guardian and conservator, and so they appointed the mother. They weren't married. Okay, they divorced. So they appointed the mother, and after a year and a few trips to Warhorse Casino, $100,000 that was supposed to be for those boys was gone. Okay, it was just gone. And so court stepped in, as it should, and redid the conservatorship and appointed my client, the grandfather. as the conservator of the account. But this is an inherited account. So when you inherit a 401k, you become what's called an EDB, an eligible designated beneficiary. So there's 3 categories with secure, right? Non-designated, non-eligible designated, and eligible designated. They were EDBs until they turn 18, at which point they become non-eligible and they got the 10-year rule. So they had stretch. Stretch means within a year, by the end of the year following the year of death, you have to take your first RMD. So they had to take RMDs. Court finds out what's going on. They come back to me and they say, hey, financial advisor, we want you to put the most restrictive restriction on that account. No money goes in or out. She's already stolen most of the money. What's left, we're in charge of. Do you think we could get the RMD done? No, because we couldn't get a court date.
To wrap this up, we talk about psychological, emotional all the time. Don't make emotional decisions. But the emotions play into this, especially when you're dealing with an estate and somebody's lost and you're grieving and you're dealing with this. The emotional side of this plays a huge factor, Jeremy.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Estate planning is really about protecting relationships. That's really what estate planning is. It's about letting your family know and letting your family understand what your intentions are, who you want to be your executor, who you want to make those health decisions. And there's a lot of examples, and we could share hundreds of examples of families that are torn apart because of the lack of communication from parents or from whoever owns these assets and not providing that information and that guidance on what they want to have done. And so I'm sure everybody that's watching the show right now knows of a situation, either a family or a family member in their own family that's causing problems because they think they should get all the money, or they think they should get all the farm ground, or they think it's not fair that grandpa and grandma are leaving money to this person or that person.
Scan the QR code, call the number, because the idea is let's put together a plan. Everything goes back to the plan. If you're not planned, there's potential failure down the road. 866-256-7778. If you think this is at the end, it's just the beginning of what you need to do to make sure that your retirement and your money goes exactly where you want it to go. Thanks for joining us. I hope we see you in the office and right back here next time on the Retirement Compass.